I understand that your good self and other senior military leaders met up with the Prime Minister and you intimated about a warning of a staggering £28 billion shortfall, defence shortfall, and that's despite the extra money coming into defence, despite having known about this changing strategic context. And apparently the Prime Minister was livid since he felt that the Strategic Defence Review was fully costed, fully funded. What's going on there? Can you enlighten us?
I thought you might ask me about the speculation in the media about the cost of the programme and speculation over particular numbers. And that's exactly what it is. It is speculation. But what I'm not going to talk about...
There's no short...
But the question is quite simple. Is there any scenario that can be delivered without cutting current programmes or reducing planned work that's in place that would ensure we don't have any funding shortfall without extra money from the Treasury? Is there any scenario? Can you describe?
Are you saying that...
What I'm trying to say is there any possibility based on what you're currently looking at, which doesn't involve cuts to programmes or again putting back programmes for a number of years, which wouldn't bring about a funding shortfall without extra funding from the Treasury? Is there any scenario?
So I think your question is that if we wanted to do everything that's currently in the programme and do all the extra things in the SDR, could we do that with the budget that we've got? And the answer is no. I mean, it's painful. It's absolutely true.
So basically, we are talking about cuts to programmes.
What you have to do is make some judgments about what you prioritise, how big the contingency is going to be.
Cuts, but we're going to be reducing programmes or changing programmes or putting programmes backwards.
All of those things are options under consideration.
No,
but it's important that we...
I think I understand
exactly
what you're saying. I think
obvious.
we all understand from what we just said that you cannot continue the way you are without avoiding cuts to
No, you see, I
programme.
didn't say that, Mr. Twigg. You keep putting that into my mind. You keep using that word, and you keep wanting to look. What is helpful for all of us, and I'm very conscious of the support this committee provides to defence and how you want the right things to be done. I'm going to speak. I've been given evidence to this committee for 10 years. I'm going to speak plainly and carefully. Don't try and put words in my mouth.
I understand what you're saying, and people can make their own judgments.
But I'll be completely honest with you that we will not be able to do everything that we would wish to do as quickly as we might want to do it within that envelope. But that is a matter for judgment for ministers around the trade-offs that they have to make. My job is to make sure that ministers understand the consequences of whatever is in the programme and that we spend the money on the things that are going to add the most value and make the most difference. I think I'd lay out my concerns in two buckets. The first is in the short term, and I know the committee had a closed briefing session on the defence medical services. And in the short term, we have a number of gaps in specialist skills. So like a lot of areas across defence, high demand, highly skilled roles are difficult to fill. Cyberspace specialists, engineers, and some in the medical profession. And so the work that the head of the medical services and the head of cyber and specialist operations command is doing around financial retention incentives to improve recruitment, all of those is how we'd address that. And that's a sort of short-term problem we need to get after. My second wider point is that if we ended up in an all-out conflict under NATO Article 5 and sustained mass casualties, the defence medical system is not set up to do that. It would have to plug into the National Health Service. It's exactly what we saw happen in Ukraine. And some of you may have heard me speak at Russia just before Christmas, and I was talking about the need for us to think about, at a national level, how we would respond and bring all the levers of government's power and authority together to allow us to do that. And at the moment, we don't have a full plan for how we would do that. Now, I have every confidence, given the way the NHS and the brilliant people in the NHS and in the Defence Medical Services responded historically that we would do that, but right now we don't have a complete plan for how we would mobilise the National Health Service in the event of an armed conflict at a NATO Article 5 level. So those are the two things that we need to address.
You'll be aware that there have been threats made about the future position or status of Greenland, with the US describing it as President Trump describing it as a national security priority. So within that wider context, have you been involved in any contingency planning on your part, given that what could happen with Greenland may end up shattering the NATO alliance?
So it won't come as a major surprise, I suspect, that I have not been involved in plans directly to defend Greenland. What I can tell you is that Greenland is part of Denmark, which is part of the NATO, which is part of our overall NATO area of responsibility. I've heard and seen the reports of what US officials have said about their concern around the security of Greenland, particularly against Russia and China. NATO provides an impeccable security guarantee for all those nations that are part of NATO. The Danish Chief of Defence Staff is bringing together a range of chiefs of defence this afternoon. Sadly, I can't go because I'll be talking to the all-party parliamentary group this evening. But we look at it as Greenland is part of NATO, and that's the context in which we see these issues. And ultimately, anything else is a political matter. But from a military perspective, it's part of the overall area of responsibility for NATO.
We're talking about more deployments. We're talking about coalition of the willing in Ukraine, perhaps defence of Greenland, not defence of Greenland, but NATO training missions. There's some sort of NATO deployment to Greenland. We have ongoing commitments in Estonia. We have agreed to back up Finland effectively. So there are quite a lot of demands on our time, yet the military is getting smaller and there are funding gaps spoken about. So I wonder if I could just ask something very specific. In talking about the coalition of the willing, and figures of 7,500 have been bandied about, which is 20,000 when you do the rule of three to have a roulement. Obviously the army's only got about 50,000 deployable. Where specifically is the risk? Because we can't put 2,000 troops with the roulement into Ukraine and not be taking risk somewhere else. So is that risk in Estonia? Or is it that we can't back up Poland? What's...
Yeah. It's probably worth me setting out the strategic question and challenge associated with the security guarantees for Ukraine and security guarantees for NATO. This is a conversation that my Chief of Defence colleagues and Keir and I have had. The agreement that was reached last week in Paris with the Paris Declaration, signed by UK, France and Ukraine, is remarkable. What's even more remarkable, actually, is the commitment that the US have made to security guarantees. And I don't know if you saw the press conference, but Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner both made very firm commitments, and it's the strongest security guarantee that we've ever provided.
Sorry, forgive me, but where's the risk if we put 20,000 troops into Ukraine?
If I might just describe this to you. So on the one hand, so we have a set of security guarantees for Ukraine, and we also have an existing set of security guarantees for NATO. If it was an entirely zero-sum game, then we would you would clearly see forces taken from one place to go somewhere else. So that might affect our ability to respond to crises overseas. It might affect our ability to service the contingency requirements, the readiness requirements for NATO. But Russia right now is fixed in Ukraine. Post a peace deal, we don't quite know what the outcome will be. And we will have to make judgments dynamically about where we put the forces and how we service those various security guarantees. because we can't do all of the things in all the places all of the time. I'm confident in terms of our ability to meet a coalition of the willing requirement, certainly in the short term, because, and it's important, and we may want to come on to this in more detail, but the concept, the principle around the coalition of the willing is that it enables Ukraine to build up its armed forces to be able to deter Russia and defend itself. So it's an enabling force. But part of the way in which we enable Ukraine to do that is we offer a backstop alongside the US offer a backstop, and we offer.
So very quickly, if I may, you say that it's. You're sort of quite happy that Russia is fixed in Ukraine. You almost say that that's a good thing. I agree with you. I think it is a good thing. But if it's a good thing that Russia is fixed in Ukraine, how is it not a bad thing that we become fixed in Ukraine if we deploy troops there?
So it depends on the scale, and it depends on the circumstances and what Russia does. You can make an argument.
What's a safe number?
As we are in a period of detailed planning, and without the security guarantees having to been signed and been through the political process, it would not be helpful for me to lay that out in public, because anything I say will just make Putin wiser. The Prime Minister, I think, has said and committed to having a vote in Parliament about deployment. Part of that will be a role for me to articulate what those risks are, and for those to be debated and considered both in government and in Parliament. And I'll absolutely commit to do that. But I think right now, before we've got the security guarantees settled, it wouldn't be helpful to speculate about what those numbers might be. But I say I'm confident in the short term that we can meet that requirement.
So, do we have a national defence plan?
We don't have a complete national defence plan
Shouldn't
yet.
we?
Yeah, absolutely. And the government is committed to doing that.
Why don't we have one?
So I think that it is a manifestation of the peace dividend. It's one of the most obvious, is that since the end of the Cold War, we have not prioritised those matters. And so as a consequence, the government for many years has not, of many hues, has not focused its efforts on developing that kind of plan. I'm pleased to say that partly as a consequence of what's in the Strategic Defence Review, that is changing. And
when are we going to have the plan?
So I would say that you will the complete national defence plan. That is a question for Cabinet.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले.
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that we will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HD videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.